Well, joining me now, three political veterans: Tim Bell, Lord Bell for the Conservatives, Tim Razzall, Lord Razzall for the Liberal Democrats, and Alastair Campbell, who's not a Lord but does know which claret and blue football team he supports.
I certainly do.
And he's a mere boy compared to us.
Yeah.
What about that moment? I mean, it was... Earlier on, I read something about kilometres where it should have been miles. I was just reading the auto cue. I mean, it wasn't his fault. Does it matter?
I think if you're an election candidate and you're the Prime Minister, I think it was actually more serious than you might think, because I think it went to this idea that he's a bit of a phony. Because OK, he's reading the auto cue and he sees it coming up, and it says West Ham and Aston Villa. I mean, nobody believes he's a football supporter. He sort of sprays it on. We all know he prefers polo and all these other ridiculous sports.
Tony Blair wasn't really much of a supporter either, was he?
Well, the urban myth about Tony and Jackie Milburn, if that's what you're alluding to, it was just that. No, but my point is, if you go through, I wrote a blog about this morning, about all his big society, compassionate conservatism, leading in Europe. I think it's the same thing. He doesn't actually believe anything. He doesn't stick to anything. So I thought it was the most interesting metaphor of the campaign so far.
Was it a PR disaster?
It was nothing.
Oh, get off.
Alastair's done a wonderful job of making it sound as though it was terribly important. It was absolutely unimportant. Alastair's production was brilliant, but the actual thing was nothing at all. Most people in Britain couldn't give a damn whether he supports a football club or not.
But why does he pretend? They respect.
Well, why does Ed Miliband pretend to be fiscally competent?
Well, possibly because Nick Clegg doesn't pretend, and doesn't pretend to believe in God either, and gets very little thanks for it.
I don't think he doesn't pretend to whether he believes in God.
But he's not a football.
That is sure. Although his shot was rather good, I thought, in your clip. Not bad. The bloke saved it. It was a good save. I suspect 98% of the electorate don't care what David Cameron said on this, and I don't agree with Alastair. I don't think it's symptomatic of some disease that the Prime Minister has of being...
Yeah.
I do think people think he's a phony and he doesn't stand for anything.
At the risk that you're going to say nothing, because I know the tough man you are, really, but has anything interesting happened in the election campaign this week in your view?
Not a great deal, but...
Has anything changed?
Yes, I think it's moving slowly towards the Tory majority that I predicted.
On the basis of what?
On the basis of looking at the polls, of the effect, of the incumbent effect at the end, the number of people who are undecided. It just feels to me, and canvassing results, friends of mine who are knocking on doors, it just feels as though it's slowly moving.
What do you think?
I think it's virtually unchanged since the start. And I think one of the interesting things, in all the elections I can remember, I can never remember as big a disconnect as to what's going on in the so-called air war for what's going on the ground.
Now, I was interested that the big rally today for David Cameron was in Yeovil, which of course was formerly Paddy Ashdown's constituency, now David Law's. He made the point that this was one of the 23 constituencies he needed to win for an overall majority. What did you make of that boast?
That's not going to happen. I think that both the two main leaders are completely ignoring the fact that there's no poll yet that has showed the two of them together having more than 66–67% of the vote, and yet they're both going around the country behaving as if they're going for an overall majority. There is no evidence that either of them are going to get it, and yet they carry on with this pretence to the electorate that they're going to. And we've had Ed Miliband today saying, "I will do no deals. I'm going for an overall majority." Well, everybody knows he's not going to get an overall majority. They're fooling the British electorate.
I don't agree with that. I think I was in Lancashire on Friday, in Rossendale and also in Bury, and knocking on quite a lot of doors, and I've never met so many genuinely undecided voters. Now, for people like us, it's impossible to sort of imagine how you can be undecided about how you're going to vote. But they weren't sort of just saying I'm undecided, but actually I'm Tory or I'm Lib Dem. They were genuinely undecided. And I think, I don't agree with Tim. I agree that nothing much has moved. My sense is that the Tories are kind of they've thrown pretty much everything they've got and nothing has moved. I do think the one part of a momentum that has changed in this election so far is the sense that Ed Miliband, who started out with people not seeing him as a credible Prime Minister in large numbers, that number has shifted a lot. And I think at the end what's going to happen, people are either going to fold one way towards the Conservatives saying, oh, you know what, I'm going to stick with what I know, or, you know what, I think Ed Miliband can do it. And
well, you don't think that they'll stick with the alternative parties, the SNP, Liberal Democrats?
Yes, listen, there's no doubt at all that the SNP... I don't think the SNP are going to do quite as well as this whole sort of rock star thing would tell us. They are doing well, there's no doubt about that, let's not be silly about it. I think that the Liberal Democrats are... I think you see Tim and the way Nick Clegg yesterday, they're talking about after the match because they've sort of given up fighting the match. And I think with UKIP, I do think Farage is looking a bit weak. But so that may be shifting, but ultimately I think that the smaller parties are getting squeezed a little bit because people ultimately realise this is going to be about Miliband in power or Cameron in power.
But Alastair, there's no evidence that that's happening. We've now had 4
weeks of this.
No, but I'm saying there's a lot of undecideds.
There's a lot of undecideds, and they'll fold one way or the other.
Is it, Tim Bell, now just a question of keeping it quiet, nothing to frighten the electorate in this week and the Conservatives glide home, or is there work to do?
I think it's what you just said. I think they're going to stick to the economy, talk about the economy, because it's the one area where they're completely safe.
Getting onto it for the first time.
It won't be the first time. It may be the first time for you. It's not the first time for the audience. But what Alastair said is absolutely right. There is a very large number of undecideds, but he knows as well as I do that the undecided fall 2 to 1 in favour of the incumbent. And that's what's going to happen.
In the past?
In the past.
Yes, but that is 2 to 1 in favour of the incumbents right across the country. So sometimes Labour, sometimes Tory, sometimes Lib Dem. I don't think the percentages will alter. I suspect Alastair's wrong, and I think 32–33% of the electorate will not vote for the 2 main parties when we come to the day.
And when it comes to Scotland, I was there last week. I think Alastair was as well. I mean, what can you do? Is there anything that either Labour or the Conservatives?
Yes, and I think
the Liberal Democrats.
Yes, I think it's beginning to happen, which is that the 45% of people who voted. Sorry, the 55% of people who voted no need all to get behind one particular candidate.
So it's tactical voting.
So there'll be a lot of tactical voting that goes on.
I have to say,
in Scotland,
a lot of candidates up there, and none of them will have any of it.
No, but Malcolm Rifkin blew the Gaffes on the Tory side.
In a way, they have to say. Well, I'll tell you what I found really interesting in Scotland. I was up there at the same time as you, and what I found really interesting was talking to people who said, "I am going to vote SNP." But then said they're absolutely aghast at the idea of a second referendum, which I did.
Well, it has to be said the SNP are pretty fast at saying we're not going to have a referendum.
Yeah, but listen, let's not pretend that the SNP at the leadership level do not want to get towards that, and that's why they would, I think, like I.
You don't think it's becoming a kind of Scottish Clause 4, a bit like the Labour for a long time?
I don't. No, I don't. I think it's. I also think that what's playing into the UK politics in this, I do think there's something extraordinary about the Conservative and Unionist Party leadership doing this kind of Scotland v England thing. I think it's really unpleasant. I think it's quite dangerous. And I know you think the same because I saw you say so.
It's just a piece of political rubbish.
Why?
It's exaggerated out of all proportion. Have you ever been to an England-Scotland match?
Yeah.
Well, don't tell me that you need to encourage...
No, sorry, that's a totally different point.
But isn't it... I mean, the SNP have had members of Parliament for 50 years without the Union.
They're basically saying Scottish MPs don't count.
We've just had a coalition government. Isn't it a bit much for some people who've been in a coalition government, David Cameron or Theresa May today, saying it's the biggest crisis since the abdication?
You've had a Tory SNP coalition in Scotland.
I think sometimes when you want to make a point, you have to make it very strongly. Otherwise, people don't listen to you. But I would make a completely different point. The interesting thing about this election is everybody is denying everything. They're denying they're going to do with these people. The Scottish are denying they want to have a referendum. They're going to do not. Ed Miliband's denying this. Nobody believes anything any of them are saying. They all know that what's going to happen after the election is whoever is in the position of having the most seats is going to form a coalition government.
Well, let me put it the other way. I mean, to a certain extent, you could say the Conservatives, by even raising the possibility of a Labour SNP coalition, are accepting that it might happen. So they're talking deals. But I mean, are you saying, as someone advising people in public relations, it would be better for any of the leaders to come out and say, look, we know we're not going to win. I mean, the Liberal Democrats say that. No, therefore, let's, as Nick Clegg did this week.
Well, with the exception of Nick Clegg, who has to say that.
Yeah.
Because unless there's a draw,
if you think nobody believes them, would it be better for them to tell the truth and say, look, this is a...
No, I think it would probably be better for them to have more sincerity in the way they put things across. But it also would be much better if you commentators didn't take their denials to mean anything but that.
But clearly, from what Tim was saying and what Alastair was saying, the Ed Miliband denial today of no deal with the SNP clearly indicates that what the Tories are doing in the Labour-Tory marginal seats is hurting him. Otherwise, he wouldn't have said it.
Exactly.
He didn't have to say what he was saying about
Clegg. I think what he has to do is to show that he's up for the fight. I said this 2 weeks ago. I don't know why the Tories keep
he's been shouting a lot today.
No, and to be fair, but I don't know why the Tories keep falling into this trap of wanting to talk about May the 8th. They've got to fight for this.
The Prime Minister's been shouting today.
We call that passionate.
But what about Nick Clegg, though? Because Nick Clegg appears to be inclining towards the Conservatives, whatever the rest of the Liberal Democrats are saying.
No, Alastair would say what a shock. I don't think that's true. Our position has been entirely consistent.
Bernard Bogdanor said it, no less, but I mean, he was wrong, wasn't he, when he said that he could only work with...
Well, Alastair would say he's wrong because it didn't suit him. I mean, what it looks like, I suspect the result of the election is going to be with the Tories, the biggest party, so it's only natural.
So are you saying they're the only people who the Liberal Democrats could work with?
No, I'm not saying that at all.
Well, why didn't the result
say that? He didn't say that.
He did. He effectively said that.
No, well, there's a difference between saying it and effectively saying it. What he actually said is that you can't support, if Labour comes second, it would be difficult to see how constitutionally you could support Labour in a coalition agreement. That's what he said.
I thought what he said was he wouldn't join any coalition that had the Scots in it.
They had the Scots supporting.
But he also said that he thought it would be constitutionally wrong to form a government with the party that came second rather than first.
He says all sorts of things about the Constitution.
But there is a precedent for that in history.
But I mean, that's nonsense. It's about winning a vote in Parliament, isn't it?
Vernon Bogdanor is right about that.
We've argued about numbers in Parliament before, but we agree on this one.
We all agree on this.
Okay.
No, but Tim's saying he doesn't agree with it.
Well, you were talking about sincerity, but do you think, in honesty, that Nick Clegg is basically in David Cameron's pocket?
No, I think that he recognises that the only pocket you're going to be able to get in is David Cameron's pocket. But he needs there to be a draw, otherwise they don't count.
And so I see Vince Cable today says he wants to be Chancellor.
Yes, he does, yes.
Alex Salmon says he's already got that job. David Cameron said we were going to be
I'm not sure Vince was deciding which party it was.
We'll have it there. We'll look forward to seeing you when there are only going to be 3 or 4 days to go. Thank you very much indeed.